What is self-love? In a society that often promotes comparison, perfectionism, and self-criticism, self-love stands as a radical act of rebellion. It is the practice of cultivating passion, compassion, acceptance, kindness towards ourself, fostering a deep connection with our innermost essence. Self-love is not a destination, but a continual process of growth, healing, and self-discovery. I've always said that also just about my fitness journey. And I've learned that my fitness journey is directly related with my self-love journey. It's about recognizing our inherent value, celebrating our strengths, and embracing our imperfections with open arms. So grab a seat, open your heart, and join me as we embark on an exploration of self-love, because you deserve to be your own greatest love. Self-love matters, right? And all we hear about on social media is a lot of self-care. But is self-care the same as self-love? I'm no expert. Let me just start with that. I'm just going to share what I think self-love is. I used to think it meant working out because I was loving my body, but it meant so much more. Buying a product to love yourself just isn't true either, right? We have all these advertisement companies that come to us and are like, buy this. This shows yourself that you love yourself. But it takes work to truly love yourself. Habits need to be created, and old beliefs need to be broken. Thought habits take time to change, just like healthy fitness habits do. My first thought when I think about self-love is what I've read in the Bible. The Bible breaks it down to love thyself is to know thyself. I mean, I definitely think it's part of it, right? You have to know how to love yourself. Just like when we fall in love with somebody, right? We have to get to know them in order to love them the right way, because everybody has a love language. So the 5 are acts of service, right? When you, let's say, wash your dishes for your girl because you know she loves when you help out around the house. There's affirmations, right? Some people like to be told, hey, you're doing a great job. I'm proud of you. There is also the touch, right? We also, I think it's universal. I think a lot of people like to be touched. I mean, I know I do. And just holding my hand, like that shows me that you love me. And then there is gifts, right? Some people really feel loved when you give them gifts. And the 5th one, quality time. Some people really feel loved when you spend quality time with them. So just how we have to learn to love other people, we have to learn to love ourselves. And to be honest, you cannot love other people until you really learn to love yourself. Hi, I'm Gia Fey, and this is my podcast. I have spent the last 10 years reading, developing my self-love, attending motivational conferences, watching YouTube videos, doing therapy. Yeah, no es solo para los locos. And so much more to help me truly love myself. My self-love journey really started with my fitness journey. I started to learn to love myself with my workout habits, right? I started to feel confident when I would finish a workout and I was like, wow, I did something really hard. And I will say it's a journey and it only gets better as you do the work. And yes, self-love takes work, just like your fitness journey. It doesn't just happen. And it's something that you grow stronger and stronger the rest of your life. On this show, we're going to talk about self-love and life and everything in between it. How to live a fit life, how to achieve financial success, how to get unstuck in life. We're going to talk about heartbreaks, best recipes for a successful business. What's the best plan for intermittent fasting? What's going on with our inner child? How's therapy working out for you? Whatever Cheeseman my guest wants to talk about, well, that's what we're going to talk about here. We will dive deep into taboo subjects that I wish I had somebody to talk about when I was young. And there will be no filters. I'm going to say it as it is. I hope that you guys will enjoy the storytelling because I will be sharing a lot of stories of my upbringing. And I think these are necessary conversations. This is information for the chismosa, or also known as the curious. This is the Gia Fey Podcast. Welcome to my first episode back. Today we're going to talk about the meaning of self-love. And I want to share my journey to learning to love myself. I'm going to do the best to inspire you to think about how you are loving yourself now. I asked you what self-love means in my last TikTok and IG live. So these are just some of the comments I got. And this just goes to show that self-love means something different for everybody. So, LATV Network said, self-love is the profound and unconditional regard, acceptance, and care one has for oneself. That sounds about right. It involves embracing one's strengths and weaknesses, recognizing personal worth, and prioritizing one's physical, emotional, and mental well-being. Practicing self-love fosters resilience, healthy relationships, and a positive outlook on life. That's a pretty good definition. Wendy Amara, who is also a life coach, she said self-love means continuing to focus on maintaining your mental health and focusing on the habits, and everything else will continue to flow. That also makes a lot of sense because I know that the more I've worked on my mental health, the more that I've learned to love myself. And we'll dive deeper into what exactly mental health is because that also, I feel, has so many different meanings to a lot of people. Frank on Instagram says, self-love has to do a lot with self-respect. I don't believe to be sheltered all the time because we won't grow. But understanding that just because the world is shitty doesn't mean you have to let everything in within your circle because there is you first. Protecting yourself because you respect yourself is a way to show love for yourself. So yeah, learning to respect yourself, I definitely would agree, is another way to love yourself. Now, Darius said, self-love to me means focusing on yourself and making money than having friends or wanting a relationship. Again, these are different meanings. I don't want to say one is right or wrong, but this is where you kind of see that a lot of people have a different meaning for self-love. Rashik said there are 4 types of self-love. Now he's breaking it down to 4. He's saying there's emotional self-love, there's mental self-love, there's physical self-love, and there's spiritual self-love. Now, I will say that when I started my fitness journey, I definitely only focused on the physical self-love, right? I was focusing on eating healthy and exercising. And I thought this has to be self-love. But on my journey, I quickly learned that that's not the only thing you need to do to love yourself. I have heard people say it means to own your own story, right? Good and bad. I also heard from a spiritual technician, I'll call her. Her name is Cindy. And she says that self-love is to give yourself permission to do what your heart desires. I think that's also a really good definition of self-love. But first, let me start by saying I didn't learn self-love growing up. I learned self-sacrifice. Just a little backstory about my life. I am a first-generation Mexican-American. Both my parents came here from Mexico about 50 years ago, and they sacrificed their entire life to get us where we are today. And thanks to my parents, I was able to go to Purdue University. I got a higher education. I was grateful for the sacrifice from my parents, but I didn't see a good example of self-love. For example, my dad worked and worked and worked. He didn't focus on his mental health. He didn't pay attention to the anxiety and the depression that was coming from working so much, from having the anxiety of trying to make it in this country. I saw him sacrifice every day to get food on our table. There was no self-love. That was all self-sacrifice. And my mother, well, she wasn't a better example either. And by the way, I love my parents to death. Like, I love my parents so much. But I did not get the best example of self-love. And maybe you can relate if you're a first generation as well, like me. My mom, she had to stop working. She had to stop following her passion. I don't want to say had to. She decided to stop following her passion to work and the career life because once you got married in Mexico, you had to follow the husband and be submissive to the husband and raise the kids. And she did. She raised me and my two other sisters. And let me tell you, she did the very best that she could. Was that teaching me self-love? Absolutely not. You know, her and my dad had a really troubled relationship because he worked so much and because instead of, giving her the time and attention that she deserved, he had other habits. He liked to gamble on his off time when he did have a day off. And my mom really just focused her entire self-worth, self-value on the love that she had with my father. So her self-love was dictated by how much my dad loved her. And that's what I learned. So growing up, in my relationships when I was an adult, that's how I measured my self-love. If there was a man who loved me, then that means I was worthy of love. And of course, it sounds crazy, but maybe you can relate. It takes us to go through some painful revelations for us to open up our eyes and see that that's not true. And, well, another thing that really changed my perspective on self-love was being molested as a child. So at 7 years old, I was sexually molested by my cousins who my dad brought out from Mexico. And I mean, it sounds so gross saying it, but a lot of times, a majority of times, sexual molestation happens with people in your family. And I remember very, very little moments of that situation, but it did eventually affect how I perceived myself in the future. Being molested as a child really, really affects how you love yourself later in the future. And I had to figure that out through my relationships. I also had a lot of body image struggles, right? I grew up really curvy. Up until 5th grade, I was at a school in Highland Park. And so a lot of people at my school were on the thicker side like me. And then in 5th grade, my dad decided to move us to South Pasadena because there was a lot of gangbanging in Highland Park. And my dad obviously didn't want us to grow up in danger, which is crazy now because if anybody knows Highland Park now, it's been completely gentrified and it's like all white people now, no gangsters, which is crazy. I'm happy that it's a better town now. It does make me sad that a lot of Latinos no longer live in that area because they couldn't afford it anymore. So anyway, so I went to South Pasadena in 5th grade, and here's where the body image struggle started because all my friends were really skinny Asian and white girls. And I was not. I was also really brown compared to what I am now. Actually, I'm pretty tan right now because I was in Kabul not that long ago. But I started to look at myself different, probably like in junior high. I remember in 7th grade being really, really embarrassed to wear shorts. Yeah, all my friends wore shorts. They even like rolled them up higher so they were shorter. Your gym shorts, you had to wear like your gym outfit. And I remember being really, really, really self-conscious of my thighs. And then I played soccer as well. Since elementary school, really, as soon as I was able to play elementary school, junior high, and then high school. And so then my legs started to get so thick. And, you know, I'm grateful for my thick legs now, but back then it just wasn't the norm. And I don't know, at that age in junior high and high school, it's like we're so desperate to fit in, right? We want to be like everybody else. We don't want to be different. And let me tell you, if you're listening to this and you are in high school, that's going to change. I promise you. You're going to eventually find people that you belong with that are also different like you, that accept all your weird, quirky personality traits. And that's when the real self-love starts. But in high school, gosh, we just want to fit in. I remember my self-love journey was non-existent in high school. I definitely tried to hang out with the popular kids. I was popular because a lot of boys gave me a lot of attention, and that ultimately led to a lot of rumors. And this really starts to affect your self-love talk, right? You start to hear things about yourself, and then you start to believe them. And it's like, I don't know why we start to believe them, but our subconscious does. And then that starts to shape the way we see ourselves. And that affected me as well. I mean, I also remember having just so much anxiety about my weight. Gosh, like I would think about my weight all the time. I mean, I started taking these really toxic Herbalife pills in junior high. I mean, I was taking like 6, 8 pills a day, trying to be skinny like everybody else. The crazy thing is eventually I started my whole brand called Curvy Girls Fitness, and it was all about being the thicker type of trainer. It's so funny when I think about just how much I hated my thick body growing up. And now I'm slowly learning to love it, even when there's lonjas that come out in places I don't want as I get older. But I'm grateful for it now. Now, my journey eventually continued on YouTube. So after I graduated from college, I went to YouTube and I started a fitness channel. I had actually become a fitness trainer in college because I had gained the freshman 30. Yeah, it was not freshman 15. For those that only gained 15 pounds, I think that's a lie because I gained the freshman 30 and then eventually it quickly went to the freshman 50. And this happened the year after I stopped playing soccer. Because I went to college to play soccer and then I injured myself my first year. And that literally changed the entire course of my life because I gained all this weight. I got super depressed. I hated myself. I hated how overweight I was. But let me also tell you that self-hatred also came from, well, my loving father. Let's just say my loving father. He had an obsession with our weight, and he was very vocal when we gained weight, when we were eating too much. I mean, maybe you guys have those families too, especially if you guys are Latinos. It's like sometimes you won't see family for years, and the first thing they have to say is, "Oh my God, mija, subiste de peso." Like, you gained some weight. And it's like, nice to see you too. It didn't help my self-hatred when I came home from college after my first year. And my dad was like, "Wow, maybe you shouldn't eat all summer." Like it was pretty cold. It was pretty cutthroat. I mean, do I resent him for it now? Absolutely not. I do believe that tough love led me on a journey to want to figure it out, right? Wanted to figure out how to lose the weight. And that did eventually inspire me to take a spinning class. I said yes to an invitation by my sister to go take a spin class that summer after college. And I went to this gym in Pasadena, and the instructor for the spinning class was my ultimate motivation. She was like a 40-year-old Latina, and she was fit. And I never saw that. I mean, a lot of Latino people are kind of overweight. Not everybody, but a lot. And the ones that I saw, I never saw on TV a fit Latina. So when I saw this lady in person, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be like her. She must really love herself. I want that confidence. I want what she has. And a year after, I got certified to be a spin instructor and I started teaching and I freaking loved it. I was like, I felt powerful. And even though I wasn't even in the best shape, I had probably lost those 30 pounds. By then, I think it was 30 pounds already, but I was still like, my body still looked like a bag of potatoes because I hadn't done weight training, which we'll go into my fitness journey probably in another episode. What I would do different if I had to start my fitness journey all over again. But at the time, I started teaching spin, and that is what helped me get into more shape. And then I started to lift weights. And then I graduated college, had no idea what I wanted to do, and Spirit led me to YouTube. Wow, you guys, this also really, really, really hurt and helped my self-love, because then I started to fall in love with the validation from people. I posted my very first viral video in 2012, and I remember not looking at it for like a month. And after a month went by, I went back to the channel, and there was 500,000 views on that one video and 50,000 subscribers. And I was like, what? Again, this is back in 2012. This was at still really premature time of YouTube. So I didn't even know what that meant, to be honest. But then that journey of self-love continued with my YouTube channel. And I started to get really noticed. And I started to get a lot of messages of love. And Gia, thank you so much for inspiring me. And I started to feed my self-love with this validation from my community. And yes, it's good to be loved, right? But if you don't love yourself, no matter how many times people tell you outside of you, hey, I love you, you're inspiring, you're amazing. If you don't think that about yourself, it doesn't matter how many times you hear it, you're not going to believe it. So it started off all good. So YouTube did start to grow that self-love. But then I got married and divorced within that same time frame of starting my YouTube channel. And wow, that was the beginning of a whole nother, it's like you go through these phases, right? It's like when you're in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, right? Self-love, it's like you have these levels. So when I got divorced, this was my next level of self-love because I was in the best shape of my life. Okay, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to post a picture of what I looked like when I first started my YouTube channel. I was in the best shape, but I was the most depressed and I hated myself because I had lost the love of my life at the time. And I was like, if he doesn't love me, how can I love myself? And I'm a piece of shit and I'm crap and I can't, I can't even hold a man. Like, it doesn't matter how beautiful I am and how fit I am. I can't keep this relationship. And so this is where the level of self-love came into play, where it was like a mental fitness. And I started to go to therapy at the time. And that was really hard because then I started to unpack all the reasons why I didn't love myself. And it had nothing to do with my ex-husband. And it had all to do with the child molestation as a kid, the father who was overly critical, which again, I love my papi, but he didn't really know how to communicate with words of love, right? I remember even just having soccer games, right? I would be in these all-star soccer games and I would shoot like 4 goals, but I missed 3 of them. The first thing that my dad would tell me when I got out was, yeah, but you missed those 3. I can't believe you missed those 3. Like, where was your head? It was never an encouragement, right? It was never encouraging words. And that starts to shape your self-talk, right? What your parents tell you really matters. So mommies and papis that are listening to this, everything you tell your child is shaping their subconscious, is shaping their self-talk. So be kind. Even if you have to do the sandwich method, right? When I was a general manager at LA Fitness, they taught us the sandwich method when you were communicating something to an assistant manager that you wanted them to get better at. You started with the positive, and I actually still do this with my guy now. When I need to tell him something not so nice, I start with the positive. I'm like, hey, babe, you've been doing so good about, picking up your dishes. Like, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. But can you make sure that you pick up all your hair when you shave in the bathroom please, just please clean it. But I really appreciate how much, you've really been taking the time to clean up after yourself. You see, it's like a good sneak in the bad and then back to the good. So that's what I would recommend, even to talk to your kids. But anyway, so that was, going to therapy really started to unpack why I didn't love myself, why the voices in my head were like, you're not good enough, you're not lovable, and at first I thought I wasn't lovable because I was overweight, right? But at that point, I had become so fit. I had gotten my dream body, yet I was so miserable inside. Your self-talk has to be positive. It has to be encouraging. And just like your fitness takes time, right? My bad habits when I stopped playing soccer and I started drinking a lot, I started eating Taco Bell at 3 a.m. after parties, like all those habits took time to change my body, right? I had to start with one habit at a time, which is like cut down on the drinking. Maybe don't have Taco Bell at 3 o'clock in the morning. So it took time, right? It took time for my body to change. And it's the same thing if your mental fitness is also weak, right? And my mental fitness from my upbringing was not very positive. I will say I had a mommy that was super encouraging. And this is the one thing that I took with me that probably helped me through that really dark phase in my life. Siempre me decía, mija, tú puedes. Tú le ganas a todas. Yo te voy a ti. Yo te voy a ti. So basically it's like, you can do it. You beat everybody else. I don't know how to do exact translation, but basically like, I believe in you. And it was those really positive words that my mom was able to tell me that helped me start to learn to love myself. Because let me remind you, my mom just preached it. She didn't do it. She didn't, encourage herself. She stopped exercising after kids. She, loved her tacos. And she would tell me things, and sometimes I just wish that she would practice them. But, you can't force somebody to want to help themselves, right? So I learned that pretty quickly. So yeah, that journey in therapy after my divorce was scary. It was uncomfortable, and it took so much courage. And if you're there hearing this and you're like, oh, if you've been hearing it from your spirit, from your intuition, from God, whatever you're hearing it from, if you're hearing, maybe therapy might not be so bad. I will tell you it's going to be scary. It's going to be uncomfortable, but I would still say do it with the fear, because that started to change how I started to see things. And my therapist was also Christian, so that really helped, at least for me, because I wanted somebody to talk to me how God would talk to me, right? How, he would use the Bible scriptures for some of my lessons, some of the obstacles that I had, and that made sense for me, and I believed it. And it just like, it really impacted the way that I was thinking. So on my journey on YouTube, it's all been great, right? I started to now grow my following, and I don't know, I hit a couple 100,000 followers within the first year. And then started to come the hateful comments. Oh yes, the trolls on the internet. And this is where I started to have another level up of self-love. And I started to realize the people that troll you, Gia, are people who are so unhappy and miserable with themselves that are projecting that. Like, that's what my intuition told me. And so I started to have more acceptance for the trolls. But guess what? The more that I accepted other people as being imperfect, the more I started to accept myself for being imperfect and having flaws. Now, self-love, and what brings me to today, I definitely feel that my self-love is at one of the highest levels it's been at, right? it's still gone through ups and downs. And I do believe in what Rashik, one of my fans on Instagram, said, that self-love, there is many components to it. As a personal trainer, yes, I have the physical self-love component. Now being in therapy, doing life coaching with other people and leveling up my mindset, I think my mental self-love is definitely evolving. I can actually look at myself in the mirror now and say, girl, I love you. You're doing the best that you can and you can handle it. And again, this goes in fluctuations, okay? Just like your weight fluctuates, right? Sometimes I eat a little bit more, my stomach puffs out more. Sometimes I eat less and my stomach looks flat. It's the same thing with my self-love. This last year, I was really challenged with a legal battle that my company has been going through. And I will share more about that journey later, but it brought me down to my lowest place for my mental self-love, right? I started to hear these really negative voices and this fear overtook me. Like, I'm not going to be able to handle this. Like, why are these people attacking me? Like, I never even hardly met these people. And it was just so mentally breaking. But I am so happy that my higher power has helped me put everything back together even better now. So my mental self-love has definitely hit another level too. And now I'm currently in the process of developing more of my spiritual self-love. What does that mean? I am learning more and more to trust myself. And that intuition that I have inside of me that's always guiding me. And that to me is what's starting to be spiritual self-love. It's this beautiful, magical voice inside of me that is always telling me I can handle it and I'm going to be okay. And no matter what, this is going to work out for your good. That spiritual self-love is what I'm currently working on. I would like to know where you're at though, right? There is mental self-love. We've talked about physical self-love, which is exercise and eating right, and yes, it's bubble baths and self-care. I think that's where self-care would fit in. And then there's that spiritual self-love, trusting your spirit, trusting in your higher power. And maybe there's more kinds of self-love, and I'm just going to continue to explore it here on this podcast. I hope that today's episode was helpful. And if it was, please share it to maybe someone that you know needs to hear this message. And to connect with me further, visit giafey.com or any of my social medias at Gia Fey. Until next time, I love you. Say it back.